I kind of wish we had a more natural thing. This is going to be cut from the podcast, but it's here for the video. Welcome.
We should just talk and then you just press play.
Yeah, sure. Welcome to the next episode of the Business Not As Usual podcast. Thank you for joining us. I'm Vince. With me, as always, Michael Martino. Michael, how are you?
I'm good. We didn't start with the usual radio intro, so this should be interesting for people listening. It's like,
I think it's going to be a great day.
What were these guys doing before they started recording?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you want to know what we're doing, well, you got to go to the video. But if you're listening to the podcast, we still appreciate you. We started it as a podcast and then became a video later. So we love our podcast listeners. Thanks everyone for listening. This has been Vince and Mike, the Business Not Usual podcast, coming at you. We need some stupid sound effects. So if you're still with us, we appreciate you. And this is the next episode of the Business Not As Usual podcast, where we are going to. What are we going to talk about today, Mike?
I thought we were going to talk about, and this should be an interesting one.
Yeah.
The challenge function. Why do you need a challenge function as you're transforming?
Interesting. What do you mean? So I think it is. So what do you mean by challenge function? So that we can get our terms right.
Well, the best part is everyone wants to be the challenge function because we don't do it properly. Because the challenge function gets to be like, how could I equate it? Like the critic, or so here
the devil's advocate is the way that I try to describe it.
Here in Canada, there's always like, the Minister of Education.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the flip side, the party that's not in power is the critic of education. So whatever that person says, like, let's say I would be the Minister of Education. I would say, everyone learns better if you're wearing blue. Vince would say, as the critic,
"Oh, that's stupid."
Exactly.
All studies show that the honorable minister is incorrect. Students learn better in purple.
You're just a bumbling fool.
Yeah, what does he know?
I will only edit Vince's remark by saying studies show, because in the challenge function, the challenger never says that. They just go, what happens in a transformational program is someone comes with this well thought out idea, right? With research, and the challenge function goes, that ain't going to work. We did that in 72, not going to work. Mm-hmm. And then they get away with that. So everybody wants to be the challenge function. So to me, if that's the challenge function,
sign me up.
This will be a quick podcast. We shouldn't have it quit.
Yeah. Everything you're doing is wrong.
And here, because it never worked before.
You're a moron.
Yeah.
No, but the thing is, when they do it that way, and I agree, most first of all, I don't think many transformation programs or business in general has a transformation program. A challenge function. Challenge function.
Yeah.
Because you're not seen as, it's like, to me, if it's done right, the challenge function is actually a thankless job. But the reason that we don't really do a great job of it is that they often, like the critic, criticize, but they don't actually offer any like tangible solutions. There's no alternative, right? There's no alternative.
And even that alternative is, why don't you do this? There's no the veracity of research. It does not equal what the original idea was.
Right.
And so that is where I cringe at the idea of a challenge function.
Right.
Because it's usually done incorrectly. Right. If the challenge function brought the same level of analysis, or if the person did all this analysis, to be fair, the challenge function shouldn't be in the same meeting. That's not going to work. It should be, great, let me take that go away and I can bring back what the pitfalls and they're based on research, as opposed to that's not going to work. I don't think that our customers won't like that. Right. Meanwhile, there's no evidence either way to prove it. So that is where I get frustrated with the challenge function.
Now, there is one way that might work, and it has to be done well. And I think your use of the word analysis is spot on, because you need some. So I just for clarity's sake, challenge function for me is a role that I think I do very well, because I can do the analysis very quickly. Where I would challenge someone or push, it's more of a push, and say, that won't work, is really about them proving that it would. So it's almost about reinforcing your argument. And this is where I use the similarity to the devil's advocate. Even if I agree with you, I am going to act as if I don't, because I want you to see some of the weak points in your argument so that you can make it stronger. So when the challenge function is done well, it makes for a much stronger supporting structure versus being opening up yourself to being blindsided by defects and errors that you maybe don't see, not just because we tried that in 72 and it didn't work then, and it's not going to work now, but ensuring that the people that have done the analysis and have done all the planning have thought through some of the alternatives, some of the choices, some of the options, and have done their due diligence in coming to their recommended choice or their recommendation. So the challenge function, if done well, can be really, really helpful. More often than not, though, it's seen as the dissenting view, and they become, well, I don't even want to engage that challenge function person, because they're just gonna, crap all over my idea, and I don't want that. So I'm not even going to talk to them about it, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, well, it's unfortunate because that challenge function is not done properly.
Correct.
So I think your use of the term push, maybe it shouldn't be a challenge function, it should be a push function. And I think to start, it should be however you come to it. Yes, that is the direction we're going. Got it. It's not like then the function becomes, I'm not saying not to go in that direction. I agree with that direction. Here are the things that, in my experience or my analysis, where this hasn't worked as well. So have you thought about when this doesn't happen, where that won't happen? So I can make your position stronger, as opposed to, but what usually happens is, we're going to go all, I don't know, what we're going to do this thing. What the challenge function usually ends up doing is creating more controversy and questions that then does not allow that path to go forward. So that path gets cut. Right. And so when people don't want to engage with the challenge function, it's because every path we take gets cut, because it becomes too muddied. It's not pushing the idea forward, it's actually cutting the idea. And so, yes, the challenge function does not get invoked because everyone knows that path is going to get cut, because it just becomes too muddied and there's too many unanswered questions, as opposed to, we got a number of questions that were answered and we'll work out the rest, or we'll push the rest with the right analysis. And what I've also seen is the challenge function doesn't have to prove what they say.
No.
Right? So the original idea comes with, we've done this research, this is what we've seen, and they go, yeah, it doesn't actually work like that, so that's not going to happen. Everybody goes, oh, okay. And so there's an imbalance in what gets put forward in meetings or in workshops. And so I think it should be not a challenge function, but but a push function.
Right.
But if you're going to keep, but everybody knows it as a challenge function. And that is the downfall of that function in a transformational program.
Right. Because if you think about what a critic, I mean, you know, food critic, movie critic, they're telling you all the things that are wrong.
They never tell you what's right about it.
Right. Right. So, you know, they're going to tell you the stuff that sucks about your idea. But when done well, it actually, you know, takes your idea and makes it better.
Right.
And makes you better, because
Right.
once you've been through that process, it becomes, you know, it becomes a known, it becomes familiar to you. And now, you know that, oh, Vince isn't asking questions to be difficult. He's not pushing us to, you know, be a pain in the ass. He's doing it to help us achieve a better outcome.
Right.
And that's the thing where, you know, it does become a delicate balance in doing that well without actually alienating yourself from, you know, the stakeholders that you are pushing, that you are challenging.
So if the position moves to, yes, this is the idea, right? So I come to you and go, Vince, this is the idea we're going to do. We're in this workshop, we're in this meeting. And if the position is, yeah, agreed, that's where we need to go. And then everything after that, it's not that this would ever get cut, this path. It's how do we make this path better? And so I'm going to push you or challenge you towards that. So if that becomes the starting point, then the function is actually a good function.
Right.
If the function is, I get to sit here and be a naysayer and then cut a move forward. We're not transforming, because everything's going to be controversial, because it's always the way you've never done it, or it's going to be it's going to be risky. Of course it's going to be risky because you're transforming. The nature of that. So if that becomes the case, then I can see a need for it. But without that as the starting point, it just becomes a person who gets to naysay things, and there's no point even having a program if that's what's going to happen.
Right. Yeah. If it's going to be arbitrary dumping, like, you know, there's that meme of that guy that sits at a table and has
I love that
the blank, and you can write whatever. It's like,
you can write whatever. Yeah.
The sky is red. Convince me otherwise. Like, you know, you don't get to do that. Like, there's certain truths, and if once you've agreed on the path or the truth, then, you know, they can't just sit there and say, no, this isn't right.
Right.
Convince me otherwise. Like,
with a cup of coffee.
No, man. Like, buy me I mean, I would totally do that once for a buy me a coffee, because I haven't been able to feed my coffee addiction in lockdown.
Absolutely.
But, like, you know, I think it's an important function. If you think back to our episode, the 2-episode series on what are the roles that you need in a transformation, this is almost like it captures a couple of different of those, but it really is the rebel is probably the biggest one. If you can get a rebel as your challenge function, because remember, the rebel wants to move things forward.
Right.
The rebel isn't dissenting because they want to, you know, watch the world burn. They do it because they want to see a better way, and they need to get people on board to get it right. So if you can have a rebel as your challenger, as your pusher, or whatever we want to call it, then that's really the role that fits that capability well, because you need that perspective. Because the alternative is you end up in a room where everyone agrees with everything, and, you know, you get into the mob mentality of, you know, the boss said this is the path, let's go, and then, like lemmings, you start, you know, jumping off the cliff. You need that person to say, hey everyone, I know that's the path. But you guys are running over the cliff, and there's a bridge right there. There's a better way to get across. It's right there. I can see it.
I think
right?
that's the nuance, though. In the Rebel, they're the ones, and we talked about it in the episode. They're the ones kind of leading. They're pulling everyone along. They're leading the pack, right? If this was a race, they'd be out in front, going, "Come on, we need to get going. We need to move. We have to." They're more the pusher. They more push the agenda,
right?
Which is an interesting take on the challenger, because the challenger is usually the one at the back pulling people back, going, "No, whoa, you need to slow down."
They're the anchor.
So they're the anchor, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the rebel is the one going, "You're not. Oh, that's a great, that's a good path, but you haven't gone far enough." And historically, the challenger is, "I'm not so sure about the path, and here's all the reasons why it wouldn't work anyway."
You guys are all stupid.
They're on
we're going the wrong way. They are, but too often they get conjoined, and it becomes it's sort of synonymous.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, because I think not enough organizations, not enough programs use their challenge function to what it could be. It's not just someone that sits there, as we've said, I think a few times. They don't just sit at a table and say, "No, you guys are stupid," and then they cross their arms and say, "Whatever, you guys are dumb." Like it's counterproductive.
I also think the challenge function is a good function, if done properly, to iterate on a product or to iterate on a service or a process. And so what I mean by that is, again, if you get past the gate of this is the path, the challenger then says, "Okay, yes, we could go live with this minimum viable product, service, process, but we're gonna quickly come across this problem. So you should make that the next MVP, because it's going to be a problem, or with my experience, it's going to be a problem." And so that person can be the person who constantly builds your backlog of minimum viable service or process or product.
Right.
So I think in that scenario, if they can't block a path, I think they become very valuable. But more often than not, they become the person that blocks the path. And have you talked to so-and-so? Because if they don't agree, we can't go forward. Right. That cannot be the position of the challenger.
Right. And you just touched on something that triggered a thought. You said around, process and this, for a challenger to be effective. By the way, if you're playing the drinking game along with us at home, every time we say challenge or challenger, take a shot.
You should be lit by now, because we said it 72 times already.
We're only 18 minutes in. Go back to the beginning and re-listen to the episode. Every time we say challenge or challenger, take a shot.
That's right.
But for them to be effective, they need to have knowledge of a number of different disciplines. If you have a challenger who is shot, if you have a challenger, if you have a challenger who, and I'll speak to my own perspective here, who comes from a Lean Six Sigma background, they're going to be very effective at identifying all of the process problems, but they're going to miss a lot of the other stuff.
Right.
If they come at it from a change management background, they're going to be very effective in managing change, but not in the analysis, not in the process, not in the technical. If they come at it from a technical background, everything is a technical fix. So you actually need a very well-rounded, holistic thinker in a role like this to be able to see all of the perspectives simultaneously. I describe this when I'm talking to people as being able to solve problems in 3 dimensions. If you only come at it with one perspective, I see it like this. I see it with blinders on. But once I can step outside of that view and take a different perspective and now look at the same problem from multiple angles, it allows you to see all of the flaws in a multi-dimensional
Mhm.
way that, okay, allows for a series of events. And so you're right, it does help with creating a backlog. If you deploy this MVP, you're going to need to make a modification to this process. As a result of that, you're going to need to engage change to do this. And for managing it becomes a multi-dimensional, multifocal approach to solving the problem, as opposed to having 8 different people look at through their view and then try to come to a consensus.
Yeah, this role, if done properly, this person has to have gone through a transformation previously, and they really need to know your business. And they need to a little bit of knowledge in a lot of different areas. It's probably more of one of your more senior people that have actually even gone through a because they need to be able to know what a transformation's like, see those pitfalls, but also understand what the customer and what you've created as a customer journey. They need to understand that. They need to understand, how does that relate to now the processes that we're building? I mean, the requirements and then the processes that we're building. How are those things going to interact?
Right.
And so when something comes through as, here's what we're going to do, or here's an end-to-end process that we want to build, they have to be able to put all the pieces together. And so this is a very important function that really helps the transformation, but it needs to be within this framework of helping the transformation move forward, as opposed to being too concerned, like always being the thing that draws it back to be safe.
Right.
It's more of a puzzle
that's
maker.
Easy, right?
Yes.
Sorry?
It's more of like a person who puts the puzzle together, as opposed to let's cut the risk. So we'll put someone who can always stop, who knows how to stop a new direction.
Right. Which is I've used that analogy when I talk about strategic business analysis, or enterprise analysis, as it used to be called. It's about seeing the organization as a puzzle,
right,
and how to fit the puzzle pieces together while they're all moving around the board.
Right.
So it's being able to look down on your organization and put the pieces, formal and informal, because there's a lot of informal structures in organizations that need to be taken into consideration as well.
Yes.
And so having that mindset can really be helpful. So to me, like, that is a perfect, if you are engaged in enterprise or strategic business analysis, like, you're actually a good fit for this challenger shot, because that is what we are built to do. You're just, instead of doing it at an organizational sort of a macro scale, you're looking at it from a program scale. So it's actually scoped down to the transformation, although you still need to be aware of how those changes align to the entire organization. So to me, it's a perfect fit for someone with that skill set and that mentality to be able to do. The trouble is, and maybe we're going to start answering our own question here. In my view, there aren't enough folks moving into strategic business analysis because they get so good at doing what they do, managing requirements, engaging stakeholders, leading workshops, that they forever become known as doers. And breaking out of that cycle is incredibly difficult. Trust me. I still find myself in that cycle at times. It's ridiculous. So, I mean, a couple things. It is true. One is, got it. But one, you need to manage. So, you should always be looking to do other things. And you and I have always talked about this. So, yes, if you've become really good at something, almost like it's autopilot, it's time to have moved on. You're probably a year late of being moved on. So always as you're doing the micro, you should be thinking of the macro. Like, where is it that I want to be next? So you don't get so comfortable in
being so great at requirement gap. Like you
Right.
can't be that great, because then yes, you'll stay there, especially if it's an autopilot. And so you should always, when you get the job that you have, that's when you start looking for the next job, which is counterintuitive considering you just got the job on day one.
Yeah,
But
be happy, man. You haven't even started yet.
No.
What the hell?
What you should be is like, I already got that job. So now what are the things I need to do to get to the next job?
Right.
So you don't get stuck in that. On the flip side, the organization should also be pushing their employees to not get stuck. Like, it's comfortable to have that wide receiver you can always throw to.
Sure.
But what happens if that wide receiver goes away? Right. So yes, Vince is very good at doing that. And then but you should expect Vince to stay there for the next 10 years.
Right.
Right. You should be, what is the next thing Vince is going to do? So though that two-pronged approach is a framework of not having people stuck and then moving into the thing that you just talked about. But it's very important not to get railroaded, like kind of put into those train tracks.
Yeah. I almost feel like we've somehow morphed into
career planning,
the career counseling podcast.
That's right.
What else about my career is sucky, Mike?
I'm your high school counselor.
Yeah, thanks, man. So I think that every program that's engaging in a transformation needs this. What's key is to actually spend the time to find a good fit. So don't just, get your most senior BA or your, the person who's got nothing to do, and sometimes they make some good comments in a meeting, and
like has nothing to do.
We don't know where to put Johnny, so let's let Johnny be the challenge. Like,
he can be the challenge function. No one likes Johnny anyway.
No one likes Johnny. But I think it is important because it is a critical role and should be treated as such, because it is going to ensure that the final outcome is closer to meeting the needs of the organization, your customers, all your key stakeholders, because of asking questions that sometimes will make you uncomfortable. And that's another sort of function of the challenger shot, is to at times know when is the right time and context to make people uncomfortable. And that is a very nuanced, very subtle, like you have to know your stakeholders, you have to know how to do it, but to make people feel uncomfortable, because from that discomfort, you're going to be able to do some amazing things.
Yeah. And as we've been talking about it, I also see that once, I always start with the customer and the customer journey. That challenge function needs to wholeheartedly buy into, when everyone has agreed that is the journey that you want the customer to go through, they need to be the champion of that journey, because that's where the challenge comes in. Because if they see the requirements, the processes, the people movement, not being in a place to service that journey, that is what they're there for. They should be challenging all the rest that comes after that, and into saying, you're not going to be able to service the journey that you all agreed to by doing it this way. And so they need to become the customer champion and the journey champion for the most part. Right.
So yeah, I mean, in summary, I guess this is a role that is critical. And we would encourage you to take time in your work, either to develop the skill to be able to do this, or if you're engaged in leading a transformation, to find a good fit, because what you don't want is to start doing work on autopilot and start making decisions solely on mob mentality and the as much as it sounds great to be sort of democratic and let's all vote, and I mean, very rarely does it actually work that way. People just agree with their boss, or
well, I think you shouldn't be comfortable. Like if everyone is always agreeing,
that's a problem.
Which makes everyone feel good because there's not conflict.
Yeah,
you're gonna have like a lukewarm. You're not gonna transform. You're just gonna do things maybe a little bit better than how you're doing it today. A transformation should be hard.
Yes.
It should be hard. Doing great things should be hard. And so don't get uncomfortable with the conflict. Get comfortable with the conflict, because that conflict is what's going to allow you to grow and move to the company that you're expecting to move to.
Yeah. Well, as Mike has much better has said much better what I was trying to say. And obviously words are not my friends today. I think that's a good place for us to close this one out. So we'd like to hear from you now. Do you agree with our need for the challenger? Drink. And is that a role that you think, not that you'd want to play, but that you think would be a good fit for you and your skill set? Because everybody wants to do it, but honestly, do you think that would be a good fit? We want to hear from you. Are you the ideal challenger? And then we could start referring you to companies that we know, because we're nice like that. So with that, any last thoughts there, Mikey?
Nope.
Me neither.
Where can they catch you?
You can get me at vincentmirabelli.com. And how about you?
michaelmartino.ca.
Yeah, hit us up. Or on the gram or on the LinkedIn. We're everywhere. So with that, this has been the Business Not As Usual podcast with Vince and Mike. We'll catch you in the next one.
See ya.